For many of the games that I play, war is nearly always involved. Whether I'm mowing down raiders in Fallout, conquering rival nations in Civilization, or commanding vast armies in Dawn of War, it's a fairly consistent thread. I'm in control. I have an enemy to face, and that enemy needs to be destroyed. The exact setting doesn't even necessarily matter. Whatever battlefield I'm on, and whatever happens on said battlefield, is perfectly justified because I'm right, and I come out on top. Games like these are enjoyable to us, as we are the victors. We're able to obtain a sense of pride in our accomplishments. We beat whatever threat we faced. We stood against the enemy, and we defeated them. We're the heroes. Except in a true wartime environment, we probably wouldn't be. For most, the thought of war on their own home soil is unimaginable. In many countries around the world, we have the luxury of being able to live safe, content, and relatively happy lives, free from the destabilizing effects that a conflict brings with it. And if our comfortable lives were suddenly consumed with war and violence, most of us would not be a hero. Most of us would merely be survivors, trying to eke out an existence. And some of us would even be the villains. Enter This War of Mine, a morbid simulation of the effect that war has on regular civilians. Inspired by the siege of Sarajevo during the Bosnian War, This War of Mine is set in the fictional city of Pogoran, Krasnavia. In it, the player is able to assume the role of a multitude of different characters, struggling to survive within the civil war. The conflict itself had been instigated by two opposing factions, consisting of the government-backed loyalist army and the rebel-based militia calling themselves the Vyaseni Liberation Uprising. Now, if this was one of my other videos, I'd be having a field day exploring the motivations and goals of both factions. I'll be analysing the groups to see who is arguably right and wrong, and why the conflict had even occurred in the first place. Except the beauty of the game is that it ultimately doesn't matter. You, as an innocent civilian, fear both groups equally. While government forces are able to be traded with in some specific areas, they can otherwise be seen opening fire, and in some cases, attacking and assaulting civilians. The rebel forces are no less benevolent. One former rebel, Roman, defected from the group after they started killing civilians as a precautionary method. Members of the Liberation Uprising may even visit your settlement, demanding supplies as payment for fighting for your freedom. While characters will discuss the cause and reasons for the conflict, the game does an amazing job of showing that ideology means ultimately nothing when you're reduced to eating rats. The goal of the game itself is to survive as long as possible until a ceasefire is called. Gameplay has two settings, imposed by a night and day cycle. During the day, your survivors are limited from leaving the refuge due to snipers. The focus is then on base building, resting, eating, crafting equipment, stockpiling supplies, and maintaining your settlement. Once night falls, you're able to control a survivor as they scavenge many different unique locations for supplies and materials to assist in your ongoing survival. Some areas will have friendly NPCs with which trade can be conducted, while others possess hostile inhabitants who will attack on sight. Each survivor has their own set of skills. Some are deadly in combat, others are stealthy, while some can just carry a lot more stuff. Each possesses their own distinct personality or circumstances, however, which can also affect gameplay. One survivor is pregnant, severely limiting the role she can take within the settlement. Children are even able to be added via the Little Ones DLC, who have their own specific needs that require care and consideration. Whichever characters you choose, you can roleplay your experience of surviving a civil war however you like. You can behave benevolently, and try to assist as many people as you can. Or you can embrace a more nihilistic outlook and act only on your own interests. As the game's tagline states, during war, there are no good or bad decisions. There's only survival. For full immersion, I'd recommend listening to a podcast, It Could Happen Here, by Robert Evans. This is a multi-part series discussing the surprisingly easy steps that could lead many democratic Western nations finding themselves in a position similar to the one seen in-game. I also realised I should probably clarify that's not a paid promotion, just a suggestion. This War of Mine has a tendency to shift your initial goals. Your own personal motivations for your characters can gradually skew as the game progresses and the situation becomes more dire. This often happens without you even consciously noticing. Slight spoiler ahead for the upcoming example. In one particular early playthrough, I came across the house of an elderly couple. two kind older citizens who were striving to live through the conflict as best they can. Their house, compared to others I'd explored, was relatively pristine. There was no threat to be faced from them. I was wanting to be as kind as possible in this playthrough, so I didn't consider entering their home. Instead, I looted some spare materials from their front yard, something they wouldn't even notice, and went on my way. It wasn't an amazing haul, but at least it was some building materials. My settlement and allies were still relatively healthy and safe. Most importantly, I hadn't sunk to harming an innocent elderly couple. Fast forward about 14 days, and things were a bit different. While exploring an area that I had not yet come across, my scavenger was shot and killed. Our party had been brought down to 2. Both remaining were starving, sick, and depressed. I was forced to choose between leaving one behind to defend the settlement while I went out scavenging, running the risk of bandits raiding our supplies and injuring the remaining ally, or remaining in place to defend our bunker and protect our meagre supply of resources, but unable to replenish them. After one particular night, my scavenger turned up basically no loot. Nothing helpful at all. When I returned home, I realized bandits had stolen the last of the food that we had. At this point, my 2 survivors were famished. We were dying. We needed food and fast. I didn't know the game well enough at this stage to properly navigate some of the other options available, as they were crawling with hostiles. So instead, I went to the only place I remembered that I knew I could get some food: the elderly couple's house. Upon entering, the elderly man got up and begged for me not to harm him or his wife. He followed me around the house, pleading for me to leave them alone. His wife was sick, and he needed their food and medication to stay alive. Now, I wasn't as big of an arsehole to actively harm the 2. I just looted what I felt I needed in order to keep my friend and I alive. I figured the game would be ending relatively soon, and I was justified in the fact I didn't harm him or his wife, and only took a relatively small amount. Upon returning home, my player felt sad. I felt sad. We had managed to medicate ourselves, feed ourselves, to the point of not starving or dying anymore, but something felt wrong. This had been my first active choice in-game to take what I wanted from someone else. In all other areas, I'd been a rat, scurrying around picking up scraps and hiding from the roaming predators. But on last night's run, I'd been in charge. I entered their home, took what I wanted, and even if they tried, they couldn't stop me. I'd been role-playing in my head that I was just an innocent survivor, thrust in a dangerous situation that I didn't deserve. But when I robbed the old couple, they called me a bandit, much like the ones that had killed my friend. I felt guilt, but I rationalized that I hadn't actually killed them. They'd be fine. I left them enough to survive. After a night where I had quite a successful run, I even felt like I could return the favor. I thought the in-game mechanics would allow me to potentially trade with them, much like you can with residents in other areas, and so off I went to repay what I stole. When I went back to the location though, something was different. I immediately noticed there was no fire burning in the fireplace. The couple weren't in their chairs. I don't know if this was legitimately the case or not, but I could swear the music itself had changed. As I explored the house, I found them. They had died in their bed, presumably due to exhausting the remaining supplies that I had left them. This old couple, who had felt so much love for one another and lived through so much, were dead due to my actions. I had killed them. I legitimately quit that run of the game right there and then, and let all that progress go to waste. It felt stupid since it was just a game, but I actually felt quite sick with myself. We've all made evil decisions in games before, usually because we are playing as a character that is evil. The evil decisions are basically the point. But this was different. I'd made the decision not understanding what it would lead to, but at the time not even really caring. This is just one example of a multitude of different actions you can take in-game, which can have dramatic ramifications for others, as well as your players. As with any game, once you do clock a fair few hours into it, it becomes far more manageable, and you honestly find yourself not needing to make evil decisions to survive. The game does have immense replayability though, since you can choose a multitude of different scenarios to increase the game's difficulty. If you find that survival with a crew of 3 becomes easy, try it with 2, or even 1. This war of mine is ultimately a great simulation of the harrowing experience war has on common people. Most fans of this channel itself enjoy my content analysing Fallout, but I feel this war of mine does an amazing job of showing the desperation ordinary people would face when thrust in an apocalyptic environment. In contrast to the many games we love which show the glory and excitement that conflict brings, This war of mine instead shows the despondency, the despair, and the senselessness of war. To quote Ernest Hemingway, in modern war, you'll die like a dog for no good reason.